Today, I wanted to put all of the alcohol markers I own to the test and compare them for you to really break down which one is the best, the pros and cons of each. And to be honest, I have kind of put this video off for a while because I just didn't feel like I had enough supplies on hand to talk about. I didn't feel qualified enough. I don't know why I don't feel qualified enough, but I just feel like some of these videos are so over the top and perfect that I didn't know if I would be able to make a video that was on the same level as those other ones. As you can see behind me, I have the Ohuhu markers in their little container. I have the Wrestling markers right there. I also have Caliart. I have more Ohuhu. These are the pastels. And then I have the Shuttle Art. Now what you're gonna notice about these last three sets that I picked up, they're all kind of like similar shape, sizes, everything like that. It's like they all use the same manufacturer to make these bags, like, you know what I mean? But I'm gonna go through everything. I'm gonna show you the brush tips, see how they compare, talk about if any of the markers yellow the pages, which ones bleed the most, and you know, things like that. If you wanna see some more in-depth comparisons, make sure to check out my coloring playlist. I will have that linked up above, down below, wherever. I have a full overview on Ohuhu standalone, and then I also did a comparison between Ohuhu and Wrestling because those, prior to buying these new markers, were the only brands I had. But now I got some new markers and I'm like, wait a minute, maybe I should have been using this other brand this whole time. So stay tuned to see which brand I think that is. So we're gonna first start off with the Ohuhu markers. If you have seen any coloring videos, you likely have seen the Ohuhu markers. These are the most recognized, I would say. They have a chokehold on the coloring community. I don't know why. To be honest, they are quite expensive compared to other brands out there. So it surprises me that one of the more expensive brands took off more than one of the cheaper brands did. Some of the pros are that the markers are super juicy and color nicely. I love the feel of coloring with the Ohuhu markers. They just are such a nice experience, I guess. Like, there's no other way to put it. They just are very nice to color with. They're not that streaky. If you know how to color with alcohol markers, you know that if the ink is still wet, you can color over it and it kind of blends together. And these ones do not leave as many streaks as other brands because they take longer to dry. So the longer dry time could be a con to you, but it's not like it's gonna smear onto your hand. It's not drying like that. It just means like if you were to put like a color over it to do some shadows, you need to take way longer for Ohuhu markers to dry and be able to create that shadow. Otherwise, they'll just blend right into each other and you won't even be able to notice that you did anything. So the reason they are not as tricky is because they take longer to dry. I'd say they smell like the least amount. All alcohol markers are going to have a smell because they are alcohol-based markers. Just some of them smell more than others, okay? So these ones are not as terrible. I think you can tolerate it and color with it for longer periods of time than other brands. One of their biggest pros and one of the things that they have a leg up on all their competitors is that they have a huge range of colors. Now, does that mean when you get this pack of 120, you feel like you have every color you need? No. I think that's one of the issues with it, is that because they have so many colors and packs, they really want you to buy more, and they don't want you to just buy 120 markers. They want you to buy 300 plus whatever markers they have. They want you to also need that organizer. I do love that they have a lot of color options out there. I do think some of the colors are a little bit too similar, especially in that pastel pack. I'd almost would rather have less colors but more variety instead of a bunch of markers that look the same to make it sound like there's more colors available. So that's just my 2 cents. Some of the cons are obviously that they are the most expensive brand out there. Another con, but this is, you're gonna see this over multiple marker brands, is that they bleed through onto the next page. They are very juicy, like I said. I said that was a pro, but because of that, they bleed more than others sometimes. So just always have a protective sheet underneath. This is gonna go for everything. Some papers are thinner than others. Some markers bleed more than others. So it's just easier to just have paper underneath every time you're coloring with alcohol markers, just because you don't know. I'd rather be safe than sorry. Now, before I go too far, there is a difference between ghosting and bleeding, okay? This is a finished coloring page I did in this coloring book from Elise brand. Has super thick papers. She gets a lot of crap for the fact that the markers bleed through. They don't bleed through, they ghost. So when you have ink on the back of the page, that is called ghosting. This is gonna happen with every single marker brand and every single cardstock. It's just the name of the game with alcohol markers. So if you are coloring in a book that has a coloring page on this side and this side, do not use alcohol markers or it's gonna ghost and you're just gonna make yourself mad. So the fact that I could color in this book pretty confidently without a sheet, and it's not gonna probably bleed through onto that protective sheet, but I still do it just in case. You never know if you get distracted and have the ink on there too long, or if you're trying to blend, that will definitely bleed onto your protective sheet. But this, not a problem. It's gonna happen with every book, every marker. Would not ever knock a coloring book for ghosting. I wouldn't even knock it for bleeding because no one said you have to use alcohol markers with my coloring book. You know what I mean? Just food for thought there. One of the other cons I have for them is that their carrying cases suck. And I truly believe that they want you to buy this. That's why they make their carrying cases crappy. And the reason I even bring this up as a con for all of these brands is because one of the cheapest brands we're gonna talk about has a carrying case better than all the other ones. So if they can do it, they can do it. You know what I mean? It pisses me off. The fact that these just like get all mixed around drives me nuts. I want them to stay in place. I want them to stay in order and not fall around. This is just a cheap bag. Like so floppy too, it just, ugh. Next are the Wrestly markers, and these are the very first ones I started with. They were the most affordable. When I started coloring, there wasn't a lot of people coloring. Not to say I'm a trendsetter, I'm not saying that by any means, but what I'm saying is coloring was not as big as it is today as it was when I started coloring. And so because of that, I had kind of heard about Ohuhu markers, but when I was looking for alcohol markers, I wasn't really looking for a certain brand. I just wanted cheap and a lot of options. So this has 120 markers, and it used to be around the $20, $25 range, and now I think it's increased a little bit because of demand, but still, I still really like them. Some of the pros are that they do have a good range of colors in their 120 pack. However, they only have 120 markers. I wish they had more. I wish they had like a secondary 120 pack because I know they would give us better colors. So I do like that in the 120 markers there is a good variety and a good difference in the actual color options and not like 5 of the same marker color. The carrying case is honestly ideal for traveling. Nothing's gonna spill out, fall over, everything's gonna stay in order, and I like that because if I'm trying to find a certain color or trying to keep things organized by color family, it's easy to do so with their traveling case because they have little slots in the bottom. Now, like I said, all alcohol markers do have a smell. These ones have a little bit more of a smell than Ohuhu, so if we're going by the smell factor, these come second compared to Ohuhu, but they're not terrible. They're not like, well, let me just actually back up. The markers are all gonna have some variance. Like I've noticed that I'll color with a few and there will be no smell, and then I'll color with another one and there will be smell. And that's the same across all brands. Some markers smell more than others within each brand. For the most part though, Wrestly isn't too over like intoxicating or anything like that. It's pretty decent. Another pro is that they're affordable, so they are a great intro to alcohol markers to learn if you even want to use alcohol markers, because honestly they're not for everyone and you don't need alcohol markers to color, but if you're going to use one and you want to start with something cheap, these are a good option to start with. Some of the cons are they are not as juicy as Ohuhu and some of the other brands, so they do dry out over time. I think that's inevitable. I use these a lot, and I do have a few markers that are just dried out at this point. There are some markers that I can no longer do like pretty large sections, or the marker will dry out just in that section alone. So that's kind of frustrating. Again, I think that's gonna happen to every marker over time, and I've had these the longest. It just seems like the Ohuhu I've had just a few months less than Wrestly, and most of them are still hanging on. I have a couple of Ohuhu markers that have dried out. Another con is that they do yellow the pages over time. So it's not gonna be immediate or the next day, but you just need to know going into it that the Wrestly markers will yellow your pages. So what I do is I just stick a piece of paper onto the back of the coloring page and tape that into there and just leave it there. That way it doesn't ruin the next page in the coloring book with like yellowing, you know? I had no idea when I first started using alcohol markers that that was a thing to even consider or to look up or anything like that. Definitely something to keep in mind and to go into knowing about, but really it's not a deal breaker in my opinion because they are pretty cheap markers, so I'm fine with adding a sheet of paper underneath. Like, it's not that big of a deal. The next markers I purchased were the Caliart markers, and I'm gonna be so honest with you. These look identical to Ohuhu markers. It blows my mind how similar they are. They are so similar that when you are drawing with both markers, you yourself will not know which one is which because they feel the same, they look the same, everything about them is the same. Like, I swear they use the same manufacturer to make the actual markers because everything about the markers is pretty spot on. Like, if there's slight differences, they're pretty dang similar. Definitely one of their pros is that they are similar to Ohuhu markers, but a fraction of the cost. You can get the same quality, but spend less money. So that's definitely a pro in my opinion. This is probably 48 markers or something like that. And that's all I have is this pack. If I wanted to get more markers, I probably could, but I got enough for now, you know, like I don't need more. But they do have lots of options, so you're not just stuck with what they have. They have more to grow with if you need them. The brush tip is super juicy and nice to color with. Pretty much the same exact experience as coloring with Ohuhu markers, so I just like how nice and smooth of an experience it is when you're coloring with those markers. Some of the cons are that they definitely are the smelliest markers I've mentioned so far. They have more of a stink. I personally don't get too bothered by this, but I know some people have said they wouldn't feel comfortable having kids use them. I don't know about you, but I'm probably not going to be having my kid use alcohol markers. They are going to be using Crayola markers if they're going to be doing any sort of coloring. Another con is that they did not come with a swatching book or anything. Well, okay, I take that back. They did come with a swatch sheet, but it was like a glossy finish and you couldn't really color on it. And it wasn't going to show the colors accurately anyways because it was glossy finish and paper is not glossy. So I didn't love that. I had to make my own. And if you are also running into that experience where you need a color swatch, I have them in my shop now, so you can print them out as much as you want or whatever and have swatches of all of your markers. And yeah, that came out of a need for my Caliart markers. Another con, and I'm just gonna keep mentioning it, is that their carrying case is not as good as Wrestly, and it's basically the same as Ohuhu, and I don't love that, so I don't love it for Caliart either. The last brand we're gonna talk about is Shuttle Art, and I'm gonna be so honest with you. I have never seen such cheap looking markers. So here's the bag. Looks the same as the other ones. They're not the cheapest markers I own, but they just give off cheap. Everything about it. Here's their little crappy swatch sheet. They did come with a little protector. I don't know what this is gonna protect against because it's so small. This isn't even I don't know why they gave that. The markers just look and feel cheaper than everything else. I don't know, can you tell? Like, they just, I don't know. They just sound cheap. Everything, I don't know how to explain it. But also look at this. Like, I haven't even used this marker and you can already see like some fading in it. I don't know if it's actually picking up like the color fading out already. And then here is chisel tip, and that's not even solid colored. Full transparency, I have not used these markers. I am given a review on them and I haven't even used them because they just, I don't know what it is about them. I just don't love them. So maybe I will be happily surprised when I do a little swatch of them, but they are definitely not my favorite, that's for sure. Let's take a look at some of the differences between the actual barrels themselves. These three are pretty much the same size, and then the Wrestly is the smallest. So if you are someone who hates the feel of coloring with big markers, the Wrestly is a good option. However, it is triangular and that might bother you. These ones are all pretty much round. Well, there's a little bit of, I guess, triangularness with the Shuttle Art. They're not perfectly round, but these two are pretty much identical. The only difference, literally, is the logos themselves and like what it says, and then the little curves. And that's pretty much the difference. And then with Ohuhu, it's gonna say the name, and then with Caliart, it just says the number. These are what the tops look like on all of them. One of the first things I want to do is draw these little squares and see which ones bleed out of this. I guess I don't need to make them that big. But I want to draw these little squares and see which ones bleed out of the square more, if at all. So these squares don't have to be perfect. I'm just literally doing a small little swatch. I'm gonna do Ohuhu, Wrestly, Caliart, and then Shuttle. I'm gonna try and stay, well, that did not work, huh? This brush is super flexible. Okay, I feel like I have to start over. That was like super, super flexible. That's one of my issues with Ohuhu is their brush tips are not consistent whatsoever. Okay, so scratch that and look how much it bled through. We're just gonna draw a little square without any pencils, and then I will draw around the square. Oh my god, that is ginormous. So they all bled onto the next page, but that's pretty typical because this is just printer papers. None of them went through onto the third sheet though. So let's take a look at the bleed through. Ohuhu definitely bled out on 3 of the 4 sides. And I do find that a lot when I'm coloring with Ohuhu is they blend out further than I expect them to sometimes. Wrestly didn't bleed at all really. What I find with Wrestly is they dry fairly quickly, so you don't have much lag time, you don't have to wait, and they don't spread out. It looks like Caliart had a little bit there and there, but not as much as Ohuhu. And then Shuttle Art also had some right there and there. But yeah, so Ohuhu bled the most, then maybe Shuttle Art, then Caliart, then Wrestly. So this is Shuttle Art on the bottom, and that's Ohuhu on top. And the Shuttle Art is shorter, but look at how much wider it did. I feel like this would be very hard to color with. Like, look at that. I'm barely doing anything. Like, if I wanted to get into a small place, I really wouldn't be able to, because this is just so... That's huge. If you have a large section, I guess this would be the one to use. That's Ohuhu. Quite a big difference. Caliart. Pretty much the same thing. Now you can see this is one of my favorite markers to use out of this set and how dry it already is. But look at how much thinner it is. So if you had a huge section, this would take you twice as long as these two, maybe 3 times as long, but good for smaller spaces. So that's everything I have for you today. I would love to know, out of the markers mentioned today, Ohuhu, Wrestly, Caliart, and Shuttle Art, which one would you be picking up? And if you've used any of these, which one is your favorite? I'd love to know in the comments. If you have any questions about any of them, let me know and I'm happy to answer them. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I will see you next time. Bye.